Currently, I'm seething with anger, to the point where I can feel myself trembling. Tonight, my suspicions were confirmed regarding who it is, and the length of time doesn't seem to matter anymore. Sherry has effectively obliterated our marriage, akin to squashing a bug beneath your shoe. Initially, I chastised myself for not seeing the signs earlier. Yet, after 8 years of marriage, betrayal isn't something you anticipate. The notion of drowning my sorrows in alcohol and confronting them crossed my mind, but why bother? My marriage is beyond salvage. He could probably overpower me physically, and with his connections, he could make my life a living hell, perhaps even more so than sleeping with my wife. So here I am, grappling with emotions that only someone who has experienced this level of betrayal can truly understand. I'm not interested in hearing empty platitudes like, "I've been through a divorce, I know what you're going through," or "I'm here for you if you need to talk." I'm not ready to share this with anyone just yet. What I need now is a plan, but I must first clear my head, and that's going to take some time. The thought of ever being intimate with my wife again repulses me. Just imagining her with him on our bed turns my stomach. At least she had the decency to carry out her affair in hotels, not in our own bed. So here I am, with a notepad in hand, contemplating my next move. If Sherry had possessed the stereotypical traits of a seductive woman, perhaps I would have been more vigilant, or at least attuned to potential signs. However, she doesn't fit the mold of a bombshell with a 36DD bust, long flowing blonde locks, or the statuesque allure of an Amazonian goddess. Don't misunderstand me. Sherry is attractive in her own right. Of average height, with short brown hair and a fit, lean physique. But compared to his wife, Sherry would rate no more than a 5, if that. So why is he engaging in extramarital affairs with my wife? Probably because he can. About 2 years ago, Sherry started working for Rogers Industries shortly after the birth of our son Nettie. While I earned enough to support us comfortably, she desired the lifestyle and possessions our friends seemed to possess. "Tony, if I work, it'll ease some of the financial pressure on you. You won't have to work overtime as much, and it would be wonderful to have you home more often," she reasoned with me. My parents have offered to help watch Nettie, so I could even work part-time. Her logic wasn't flawed, but I felt strongly that Nettie needed her at home for at least a few more months. Little did I suspect she was already exploring other options. We encountered Will Rogers at a charity auction, courtesy of tickets given to us by my boss, who detested such events. I saw it as an opportunity for a pleasant evening with my wife. As he entered the room with his wife on his arm, all eyes gravitated towards him. Tall, handsome, and affluent, individuals like him exuded a nearly rock star-like allure. He effortlessly charmed the crowd, leaving most women, including my wife, swooning in his wake. "That's Will Rogers and his wife, Chloe," my wife whispered to me. "He owns 3 companies in town, and his wife used to be a runway model. The dress she's wearing tonight probably costs more than my entire wardrobe," she added, her voice tinged with awe. "But they probably aren't nearly as happy as we are," I reassured her, planting a kiss on her cheek. "Yeah, right. Wouldn't it be nice to have that kind of money, even just for a little while?" she mused. At some point during the evening, we were introduced. I can't recall how we ended up discussing our professions or Sherry's desire to re-enter the workforce, but the topic slipped my mind until weeks later when Sherry brought it up again. Will flaunted his wealth that night by outbidding everyone for the top 5 items. When I jokingly called him a show-off, my wife shot me a disapproving glance, asserting that he was doing it for charity. I remained skeptical. It seemed more like a display of his ability to do as he pleased. Individuals like him often crave the spotlight. One thing I did notice was that his wife kept a watchful eye on him and every attractive woman in the room. It appeared she didn't entirely trust her husband, or so it seemed. Regardless, 3 weeks later, I returned home to the news that Sherry had secured a part-time job. And where else but at Rogers Industries? They just launched a new department, and even though it's only part-time for now, It's likely to evolve into a full-time role within 6 months. She informed me with evident delight. Isn't it wonderful? I wanted to respond with a resounding no, but I didn't want to dampen her enthusiasm, so I put on a smile and told her I was proud of her. How did you come to know about the opportunity? I inquired. My friend Batty works there, and Will asked her if she knew anyone seeking employment. She mentioned my name, and I emailed him my resume. I didn't want to say anything until I had the job secured. I had my interview last week and was offered the position the next day. Isn't it wonderful? She repeated, her excitement palpable. So, you'll be working directly under Will? I probed. He and I will be spearheading a new department, tasked with managing all the charitable endeavors of his corporation. That doesn't sound like a simple job, I remarked. Well, I'll be responsible for assessing all the charitable requests his companies receive and assisting in the selection of recipients for donations. It's quite a bit of responsibility, she explained. I'm sure you'll excel at it, dear. Perhaps we should go out to dinner to celebrate, I suggested. We don't have the funds right now, but soon, very soon, we will, she assured me. And so it began. From then on, it was all about Mr. Rogers this or Will that, and how virtuous a man he was. It nearly made me sick. Occasionally, she would have to accompany him on business trips to inspect various companies or locations, but they were never overnight. After all, we had Nettie to consider. Tony, I'll be out Tuesday night next week, she mentioned during dinner the following week. Will is considering donating a wing to a small hospital in Alabama. We'll tour the hospital and then attend dinner with their board that night. I'll be back in time Wednesday to pick up Nettie from my mom's house, she informed me. Why not just fly back after dinner? I assume you'll be using his private plane, I inquired. Mr. Rogers prefers not to rush the trip. Plus, if anything arises during dinner, we'll need to address it the following morning before leaving. It's just one night, she explained, flashing a reassuring smile. I wasn't entirely comfortable with the arrangement, but I trusted my wife. Will would have to be utterly foolish to make advances towards Sherry, considering what awaited him at home. I wished her a good time, and anticipated her return Wednesday night. I'll probably need some extra affection Monday night, so I won't feel too lonely Tuesday night when you're away, I joked, and she made sure to fulfill that request, providing me with a week's worth of affection. When she returned Wednesday night, she topped up my affection reserves, and I felt contentedly oblivious. Our marriage seemed as solid as ever, or so I thought. Life continued. We enjoyed extra financial stability, but Sherry's frequent out-of-town trips, about every other month, and the approaching holidays started to weigh on my mind. Before I proceed further, allow me to explain my profession, as it plays a significant role in the events that unfold. I work for a company specializing in testing security systems and computer firewalls. We're the experts if you want to gauge the vulnerability of a system to hacking. With my background in accounting and computers, I primarily work with banks. Typically, a board member commissions us to attempt to breach or disrupt a particular division's security. We simulate hacking into their systems, access specific accounts, essentially fabricating a white-collar crime. About 65% of the time, we succeed, and the bank usually hires us to rectify their vulnerabilities. The most exhilarating experience I've ever had occurred about 4 months ago. Armed with a counterfeit passport from Panama, I sauntered into a local Bank of America branch to open an account. Upon meeting with the bank president, he meticulously guided me through the premises, fully aware that I intended to deposit $20 million into his institution. Expressing concern over security, I probed him for details, and he obligingly divulged his bank's security measures in exhaustive detail. Assuring me of the bank's impregnability, he unwittingly ignited my passion for a challenge. Armed with all the necessary information for fund transfers, I pledged to execute the operation the following week. With my partner Jimmy by my side, it took us no more than 2 days to infiltrate and disrupt their computer systems. Siphoning funds from 4 random accounts, I consolidated them into the new account I'd established under my alias company name. I promptly informed our client of our success, providing a thorough breakdown of our methods. Needless to say, they were duly impressed and promptly enlisted our services to rectify their vulnerabilities. Though the bank president wasn't thrilled with the outcome, he managed to retain his position. Such exploits comprise my profession, and as I've mentioned, I excel at it. Over the past 6 years, I've assumed approximately 8 aliases, complete with meticulously forged supporting documents. To the untrained eye, roughly 95% of individuals inspecting the documents, they appeared indistinguishable from the genuine articles. These documents would prove invaluable in the times ahead. About 3 weeks before Christmas, armed with a shopping list, I embarked on a spree for presents. Buoyed by a generous bonus, I plan to splurge a little extra this year. Among the gifts, I purchased a new iPod for my wife, and upon passing Victoria's Secret, decided to indulge in something special for her, or rather, for us, from the store. With assistance, I selected 2 tantalizing outfits. My hands laden with presents, I made my way home. With Sherry occupied at work, I seized the opportunity to wrap most of the gifts and discreetly stow them away. Sherry had returned home earlier that morning from an overnight trip with Will, but hadn't yet found the time to unpack her suitcase. Since I had already finished my tasks, I figured I'd lend her a hand by putting away her belongings. Tossing her things onto the bed, I opened up the suitcase and began sorting through her items. As I sifted through the clothes, one particular piece caught my attention. It was impossible to forget. A fiery red ensemble with lace-trimmed crotchless panties. Even a man at death's door would remember that outfit. Besides this conspicuous garment, there was nothing else of note in the suitcase, so I carefully repacked everything and closed it up. If you've ever heard the term smoking gun, that outfit was mine. I had a pretty good idea of who, but it was the why that baffled me. We had a damn good life. It seemed Sherry wanted it all. That moment marked the beginning of our downfall. Had I not been the trusting husband I was, or if Sherry had bothered to tidy up upon her return, she might have gotten away with it, and I would have remained the oblivious, devoted spouse. That evening after dinner, Sherry expressed a desire to be intimate, but I managed to deflect her advances. I simply wasn't up for it, citing that I had a lot on my mind. A crusty pair of panties wasn't enough evidence for me. I needed something more substantial, not for my own sake, but to expose Mr. Rogers. Given my line of work, I reached out to a friend who had assisted our company in the past. It was a straightforward request. I needed him to keep an eye on Sherry while I was away on a business trip to Denver the following week. "Kevin, I need to know where she goes and who she's with," I explained. "I suspect she's cheating on me, but I need concrete proof." "Damn, Tony, I'm sorry to hear that. Don't worry, if anything's going on, I'll find out," he assured me. With my assistance, he bugged the house, her car, and even discreetly placed one in the lining of her purse. "Sherry, I should only be gone for 2 nights at most. I want to wrap up this project before Christmas, so we can enjoy the full 2-week holiday period together," I informed her. "Plus, while I'm away, you can use the time to shop for my Christmas present. After all the nights you've been away this year, it better be something good," I added, hoping to provoke a reaction from her. She simply looked at me in silence. On Wednesday, I boarded my flight to Denver and gave Kevin the go-ahead. With Jimmy already there, we managed to complete everything by 6:30 that evening. "Come on, Tony, let's grab a drink or 2 and have dinner. There's a fantastic seafood restaurant just 2 blocks down from the hotel, and the waitresses are quite easy on the eyes," Jimmy suggested. "Give me 20 minutes and pick me up out front," I instructed him. I called Sherry's cell to let her know I was going out for dinner and might turn in early, hoping to catch her off guard. "What are your plans for tonight?" I inquired. "All I want to do tonight is take a hot bath after I put Nettie to bed, and then I'll probably just read in bed," she replied. "Love you," Sherry said before ending the call, but I couldn't bring myself to reciprocate. That part of our relationship had withered away, leaving only regret in its wake. Dinner was enjoyable, and Jimmy was right about the waitresses. After one final drink at the hotel bar, I headed back up to my room, noticing the blinking message light on my phone. It simply read, "Call me." "Tony, your cell was off," Kevin began as soon as I answered. I left it off deliberately. I wanted to enjoy one more good meal before you called. "So, what have you found?" I inquired. "She got a sitter and had dinner with Will Rogers. Afterward, they went up to room number 312 at the Ramada Inn. I couldn't capture any inside pictures, but I have them entering the room, and I'll capture them leaving as well," Kevin explained. "I managed to record some audio, but I doubt you'll want to hear it. He only rented the room for one night, so I'll monitor their activities from your home tomorrow." "I'm sorry about this, Tony. There will be no charge for this," Kevin added solemnly. "She's going to regret ever crossing paths with that jerk," I muttered to myself, seething with anger. Now, I sit alone in my hotel room, plotting my revenge. Divorcing Sherry would be too straightforward. I need to strike where it hurts the most, and I know exactly how to do it. This Christmas will be one she'll never forget. By Thursday morning, I had my plan laid out. Most of it couldn't be executed until the 23rd, as everything would be shut down for the holidays. Armed with one of my counterfeit passports and my son's birth certificate, I booked airline tickets under my assumed identity. Opting for a circuitous route, I aimed to throw off any attempts to trace my whereabouts. Holiday travel is chaotic, with most people eager to book their flights and move on. I secured a cash advance on my credit card to eliminate any paper trail. I liquidated all 4 of our CDs from the safety deposit box and withdrew all available cash. Planning to travel light with just a carry-on, I needed funds to buy clothing upon arrival. The last item on my agenda took me 3 days to accomplish. Rogers Industries had connections with 2 local banks, one of which I held an account with. My plan was to hack into the bank's mainframe, then into Rogers' account, and transfer all the funds to our joint savings. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. I needed Jimmy's expertise for this task. Not wanting to implicate anyone else, I enlisted Jimmy's help as a backup for troubleshooting. I figured a trial run would be prudent before taking any real action. While we had experience with similar tasks before, navigating each bank's security measures proved to be unique challenges. On the first day, I hit a roadblock with the firewall, unable to breach it. With guidance from Jimmy, the following day I managed to penetrate the system, spending the ensuing hours combing through accounts until I obtained all the necessary numbers. My plan hinged on executing the initial transfer late on the afternoon of Friday, the 24th, from Rogers' account to mine, swiftly followed by electronically funneling those funds to the first of 8 overseas accounts. Precise timing was paramount. Maintaining a low profile in the final week, I gathered all the intel from Kevin, making copies for Sherry, her parents, my parents, and Will's wife, Chloe. I paid a premium to ensure their delivery on Christmas Eve, with the exception of my parents. Nettie and I decorated the tree and arranged all the presents beneath it. Since discovering Sherry's affair with her insufferable boss, I had been as distant as an iceberg, knowing she must suspect my awareness of her betrayal by now. I had packed a small bag with clothing and stashed it, along with a copy of Kevin's report, in the trunk of my car. I was fully prepared for the 24th. "Tony, you've been avoiding me all week. Are you okay? Is there something on your mind?" she queried, sensing the tension between us. It was time to set the trap. "Yes, Sherry, there is something I need to discuss with you, but I don't want to spoil Christmas for Nettie. Let's wait until after the holidays," I replied carefully, laying the groundwork. "Well, at least you and I could have a little fun tonight. It's been a while," she suggested, attempting to distract me by unbuttoning her top. That's when I decided I'd had enough and metaphorically dropped the hammer. "What's the matter?" "We're too busy tonight," I retorted before pivoting and heading upstairs to the spare room. I closed and locked the door, then settled in to wait. There was a faint knock at the door, but I ignored it. "Tony, we need to talk. Please open the door, will you?" she pleaded. I'd sooner face a pack of Hell's Angels than engage in conversation, I thought to myself as I attempted to drift off to sleep. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with me, but I found myself wide awake just after 7 o'clock the next morning. Dragging myself out of bed, I took a shower, shaved, and prepared for what promised to be a grueling day ahead. I craved coffee, lots of it, if I stood any chance of making it through the next 24 hours. By 9 o'clock, Nettie was up watching cartoons and Sherry shuffled towards the kitchen. Her eyes were red, evidence of a sleepless night. I had reached my limit of caring. I just needed to endure until 2 o'clock in the afternoon before kicking off the next phase. "How long have you known?" she finally inquired. "Does it really matter, Sherry?" I replied wearily. "I suppose not. Is there anything I can say?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. "What could you possibly say? That it was just sex, that you don't love him, only me, and that it was a terrible mistake. You could say all that and more, but it wouldn't make a difference to me anymore. I'm taking Nettie over to my parents this afternoon, and I don't want you to join us because you're no longer part of our family. I hope he was worth it, Sherry, but from where I stand, I doubt he was. Excuse me, I need to load up the gifts for my parents and get Nettie ready to go," I said, my tone laced with disdain. With the gifts packed in the car and Nettie dressed, I instructed him to give his mother a goodbye kiss. She remained oblivious to what lay ahead, and I had no intention of revealing my hand just yet. "When will you be back?" she asked tearfully. "When we return," I replied curtly. "Do you have plans to go somewhere?" "No, I'll be here when you get back," she murmured, her voice choked with sobs, as I closed the door behind us. "When's Sherry coming?" my mom inquired as we stepped inside. "Do you want the short version or the long one?" I replied as my dad took Nettie and headed towards the Christmas tree. "She's staying home because she's been having an affair with her boss for a while," I disclosed to my mom. Once the initial shock had subsided, I informed her that Nettie and I would be leaving for a while, and we'd be in touch once we settled down somewhere. "Mom, let's not dwell on it, and I won't have to deceive you," I urged her. "I'm going to make them pay for what they've done, each in their own way. So let's enjoy this afternoon together as a family, because I'm not sure when we'll have another chance." At 4 o'clock, I hacked into the system and initiated the transfer of the entire balance from Roger's bank account to our joint savings account with Sherry. By 6:30, Nettie and I were on the first of 3 planes heading out of the country. I can only imagine how many times Sherry tried calling my cell phone before realizing I wouldn't pick up. It was switched off and discarded in a dumpster 2 blocks from my parents' house. Just before boarding the next flight, I transferred the funds from our savings to the first overseas account. From there, it would be automatically distributed to 8 other accounts by early Christmas morning. I was going to bring joy to many children on Christmas morning. Glancing at my watch, I envisioned the surprised expressions on people's faces as my deliveries were made on Christmas Eve night. According to Kevin's evidence, Chloe reportedly kicked her husband so hard that he required medical attention to restore his assets. Sherry's parents were equally displeased with their gift, making it abundantly clear to Sherry how foolish she had been. By the time Sherry realized we weren't returning, she had received her package containing photos, audio recordings, and a letter from me. I laid out the details of how I had discovered her affair and expressed my inability to forgive her. "You don't deserve mine or Nettie's love, so you won't have it from this day forth. The house and everything else in it are yours to do with as you wish. Nettie and I will be starting a new life without you, and I only hope that one day I'll find it in me to forgive you, but I don't see that day coming for a long time," I stated firmly. "By the way, since you and your accomplice started your unholy union under the guise of donating money to good causes, I've decided to assist you both. The $1.2 million in their Bank of America account has been donated, in Rogers Industries' name, to 8 children's hospitals in developing countries. I've instructed them to formally express their gratitude to Rogers Industries 1 year from today. You can convey to your friend, Will, that I hope he enjoys everything, because you'll be the dearest mistress in his life. So have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'd like to say that I'll see you around, but that won't be happening anytime soon. I'll keep Mom updated, so if you can stay on her good side, perhaps she'll pass them on. Finally, if you want a divorce, be my guest. I won't contest it. We arrived in Panama on Christmas morning. I had arranged in advance and rented a 2-bedroom condo just off downtown. I had managed to save enough from Rogers Industries money to cover our expenses. Although the cost of living was relatively low here, I knew I would eventually need to find some form of employment. For the first couple of weeks, Nettie inquired about his mom, but eventually the questions ceased. I hired a live-in nanny at a nominal cost, and the 3 of us formed our own little family. Despite a modest budget, I launched my own software protection company. Initially avoiding the larger banks, my reputation flourished among the smaller independents, leading them to seek me out for assistance. 5 years after settling in, there was a knock on my condo door. I knew it had to be you when I heard about a new competitor starting up down here. Jimmy exclaimed with a laugh. Aren't you going to invite me in? We spent over 2 hours catching up before heading out to dinner. It turned out that Rogers Industries' board of directors was displeased with their charitable donations and ousted my friend Will as the company president. He nearly went bankrupt, covering the $1.2 million loss, along with his divorce from his wife, Chloe. Sherry was terminated after it was discovered that the funds had passed through her savings account. Although they attempted to press charges against her, she was eventually exonerated. As soon as I heard about the debacle, I had a hunch it was you. I figured you had skipped town, and when I heard about the new competition, I knew where to find you. Jimmy explained as he handed me a contract. The offer from the Home Office is to either buy you out or bring you in as the head of the new Southern Division. The salary is based on U.S. standards, so you could live like royalty down here with much less responsibility. Give it some thought. I'll be back at the end of the week. Jimmy stayed with me for 3 days. We indulged in food and drinks, and he even found some Latin ladies to his liking. I sent him back to the USA with a broad grin, a signed contract in his pocket, and a letter for Sherry along with some pictures. Dear Sherry, as you can see from the photos, our son is growing up rapidly. He attends a small private school here and has become fluent in Spanish, perhaps even better than English. He's currently learning Chinese since about 25% of the students are of Asian descent. His computer skills are exceptional, and by the time I retire, he'll be more than prepared to take over from me. He knows about our separation, but I've never told him the reasons behind it. He simply accepts the arrangement that he lives with me while you reside elsewhere. For obvious reasons, I couldn't disclose my whereabouts to anyone, and I understand that both our parents were upset after I left. Mom mentioned she forwarded everything I sent to you once she got over her anger, so at least you know how Nettie is doing. For what it's worth, I've forgiven you. My new partner believes I was carrying too much emotional baggage, and it was time to let go and move forward. It's a pity things turned out the way they did because you would have loved it down here. I don't plan on returning because Mom and Dad are considering getting a place here, at least for the winters, so there's nothing left for me up there. If you ever want to see Nettie, you'll need to come down here, at least for now. Mom never brings you up and I don't inquire, but I do hope you've managed to recover after losing your job. However, I can't help but smile knowing that we'll lost everything. Karma, I suppose. That's all I have to say. I hope you find someone you can be faithful to and move on with your life. As for me, I found someone very special. She treats Nettie like her own and brings joy to my life like you once did. We're not married yet, but it's on the horizon. Nettie will have a new sister in the spring, so it's time for me to take the plunge once again. You're welcome to write to Nettie if you wish, but this will be my final letter to you. Tony. Sherry struggled to read through the letter, her eyes damp with tears. In the aftermath, she cut ties with Will completely. Finding another job wasn't easy. The scandal had tainted her reputation, and opportunities were scarce. The men who showed interest were either not suitable or simply looking for a fling. She's currently seeing a salesman from out of town, but they're taking things slowly. Seeing Nettie looking well and content brought both relief and longing. Sherry yearned to see him, but finances had been tight since she lost the house in the wake of the housing market crash. She often found herself replaying the what-ifs, lamenting the choices that led her down this path. But dwelling on regrets offered no solace. All she had now were lessons learned and the hope for a brighter future. It's a treacherous night on the road. The highway, a 2-lane speedway, is shrouded in darkness and rain, and I'm still at least an hour away from home. How did it come to this? Part of me wants to just turn the wheel, let my SUV flip, and bid farewell to this mess. But I won't. I can't. I have 2 kids I love, and despite everything, I still love my wife. As I inch closer to home, I wonder what awaits me there. I'm filled with a mix of anger and confusion. Could my wife really be cheating on me? And with that guy, I fear she is. I'll find out soon enough. Within the hour, I'll know for sure. Glancing at the dashboard clock, it reads 5:00 p.m. Friday, November 14, 2013. It's dark, cold, and wet outside. I should have replaced or at least checked my tires. I know they're almost bald, but this is my runaround truck, not my good one. No one else drives this beat-up old thing but me. I'd never let Diana near it. It's too risky. I only used it today because I wanted my nephew, John, to have my good vehicle. John, just 19 years old now, recently graduated from high school and decided to take a year off to work before heading to college. He's my oldest brother's eldest son, a great kid. John has been working for me, mainly splitting firewood since he's sprained his ankle. All right, I'll confess, I'm a farm boy, but not just that. I graduated from high school and went to college, finishing in 4 years. I'm not some tough guy, just someone who works hard for my family. I don't possess any extraordinary skills, I just put in the effort. I did serve in the Army Reserves though, wore the uniform with pride. I only made it to E5 and never got deployed overseas, thankfully, and I've been out for 15 years now. It might have been just the motor pool, but I'm still proud of my service. I love my country. My parents raised 5 kids. I'm the middle child, 3rd out of 5. This road is treacherous. It's slick from a light rain, more mist than rain, making everything slippery. People seem more careless when the roads are like this. Damn, I'm running late. According to John, if I hurry, I might make it there before it's too late. All right, so where exactly is this there? It's at a Motel 6, just off Interstate Route 81 in Pennsylvania. And who's at that Motel 6? Well, it's none other than my infuriating wife, Diana, along with her so-called lover, Scott Jenkins. I need to get there. I need to stop her before she does something we'll both regret. Today, John had my good truck, so he could keep an eye on Diana, while I drove to Martinsburg to settle some scores with a couple of jerks who thought they could cheat a couple of kids who worked for me. Those boys had delivered 8 cords of good seasoned oak firewood to this guy's house. But then he got all nasty, claiming the wood wasn't up to par and refusing to pay. He even had his brother with him for some intimidation tactics. Martinsburg is now part of the outermost ring of the D.C. suburbs, where housing is expensive and firewood sells for $200 a cord. Cutting and splitting wood is tough and dangerous work, and nobody's going to shortchange me and my workers out of $1,600. I had a baseball bat on the back seat to make sure of it. And you bet I got our money. Diana knew I had to be out, and I guess she saw this as her golden opportunity to get away with something. But I don't think she took John into account. John has been filling me in on the Diana Scott situation for weeks now. Scott's quite the ladies' man, and he's been showing interest in Diana. Nothing has happened yet, but it seems like today or tonight might be their big chance. I notice I'm running low on gas. I should pull over and call John to get the latest. This whole situation is really getting to me. Diana has always been quite demanding, but I have to admit, I'm not the easiest person to deal with either. We've been married for 15 years and have 2 kids, Travis, who's 12, and Jesse, who's 11. They're both amazing kids, and I love them dearly. I also love their mom. I met Diana through my younger sister, who was friends with her in college. Diana came from a wealthy family, was the prom queen, lead cheerleader, and the most popular girl in high school. And that popularity followed her to college, where guys flocked to her like she was some sort of magnet. How did we meet? My sister dragged me to the Fall Apple Festival outside Gettysburg one September. I think it was 1995. Diana was there, dishing out those tasteless fries they called festival fries. To me, they tasted awful. I was grumbling to my sister about waiting in line for this junk when the girl behind the table whacked me on the head with an umbrella. She hit me and said, "If you don't like my fries, why are you even waiting?" I couldn't let her one-up me, so I smirked and said, "Who are you?" "Elephant Girl." I said that because she was taller than me. That's when my sister stepped in. "Diana," she said, "I want you to meet my little brother, Frank." The tall one smirked. "I can see why you call him your little brother. Where'd you find him?" "Munchkinland." And that's how it all began. A few minutes later, we were all at a picnic table, exchanging witty remarks. Was I smitten? Absolutely. But I knew I couldn't let her know. She was among the most striking women I had ever met, and she had found me at a vulnerable moment. My college sweetheart had relocated to California in search of her ideal match. Diana found herself in a similar situation on the rebound. Her previous boyfriend had a couple of issues. First, according to Diana, he couldn't remain faithful. And second, he expected her to be intimate with him. When she refused, he left. I learned about Diana's ex on one of our initial dates. It seemed like she was giving me a heads up about a few things. Firstly, she wanted me to understand that if we were dating, it meant exclusivity. And secondly, she wasn't interested in physical intimacy unless we were married. She pretty much indicated she was a virgin. Yeah, right, like I believe that. That kind of innocence is rare nowadays. We dated for a year before I proposed. I was nervous about it, fearing she might be biding her time until someone better came along. I presented her with a ring and asked if she wanted to continue what we had started. She laughed and said nothing had started yet, but she was willing to give it a shot. I stopped at a gas station, grabbed some fuel, a cup of black coffee, and a bag of chips. I'm not supposed to indulge in snacks like chips. They're on Diana's list of forbidden foods. I'm also banned from sodas, white bread, candy, ice cream, chocolate, or any pastries. Diana says my cholesterol is too high. I needed to use the restroom. While I was in there, I couldn't help but wonder why she didn't consider messing with me, and why she chose to involve herself with someone like Scott Jenkins, who's basically worthless. It was eating me up inside. I'm not one of those guys who spends all day on the road. I'm not lazy. I provide for my family. I went to college. I'm not dumb. When I graduated, I knew I wouldn't get far with my dad's farm. I have 2 older brothers. Sure, if I stayed there, I'd just be another hired hand, but I wasn't cut out for an office job either. Our grandparents helped me out. I invested in some lawn equipment and started my own lawn service, which did pretty well. But the competition was tough, so I teamed up with some farmers who owned large wooded areas and got into the firewood business. That worked out, but I still had a lot of downtime in the winter, so I started buying snow removal equipment. Now I'm running a lawn service, a firewood business, and during winter, I've struck deals with several businesses and even one of the counties to help clear the roads and parking lots when it snows. I'd say Diana and I are doing pretty well. Diana handles our books, manages payroll, and handles most of the hiring and firing. After I took care of business in the bathroom, I grabbed some coffee and chips, hopped in my Jeep, and dialed John. He answered on the first ring. "Uncle Frank, I've got some bad news." I don't shy away from the truth. "What is it, John?" "Aunt Diana and Mr. Jenkins got a room at the Motel 6. They're there now." "All right, John," I replied. "I'm on my way." John asked, "What are you going to do, Uncle Frank?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. I turned the ignition and merged onto the highway. I estimated another 40 minutes before I'd have the full story. I drove as fast as I could within the speed limit, but apparently I was going faster than I realized. I got pulled over not for speeding, but for a busted taillight. Why a state trooper would choose to stop me in the dark in the midst of misty, foggy rain I couldn't fathom. Nevertheless, I accepted the inspection ticket, thanked him, and continued on my way, another 15 minutes behind schedule. The whole situation with Scott Jenkins was a farce, a terrible one at that. He was a newcomer in town, a braggart, and a master of exaggeration. But he had money and somehow managed to snag a membership at the country club my wife, Diana, insisted we join. Diana is like a golden goddess standing at a statuesque 5'11". With captivating blue eyes, she possesses the kind of beauty that could start wars. Her name is Diana, fittingly so. Homer famously said the Spartan woman's beauty launched 1,000 ships. Well, my Diana is so stunning. She could probably make the D-Day Armada seem insignificant. She's well aware of her allure, and for over 15 years, she's used her breathtaking beauty to tease me relentlessly. Not that I mind much. I give her as good as I get. Diana is 2 inches taller than me, and when she wears her high heels, she towers over me. And she does it on purpose. Often at the club, when she's dressed in one of her sleek and alluring black dresses, black stockings, and shiny patent leather heels, I intentionally opt for heel-less moccasins. She wears those heels just to get under my skin, and I wear the moccasins to retaliate. It's been this way for as long as I can remember. We bicker with each other about everything, at least in public. At home, it's a different story. In public, I can never seem to do anything right. At home, well, I'm never in the wrong. It's unimaginable that she'd be involved with someone like Scott Jenkins. Everyone knows about the conflicts between Diana and me. According to John, that's what led to her current predicament. I called Jenkins a blowhard, and apparently, according to John, Mr. Blowhard made a bet that he could seduce my wife before Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving's just a week away. John mentioned he'd been taking bets, offering odds lately. It's devastating. I can't fathom Diana doing something like this. If she knew it was over a bet, she'd be furious. But Diana isn't one to indulge in gossip. She wouldn't entertain them. Yet, she's been acting strangely lately. She's distant at home. Sometimes when I enter a room while she's on the phone, she either leaves or speaks very softly. Other times, I've tried calling her and couldn't reach her. This last bit worries me even more, especially since she's so involved in our business. She's always been easily reachable, but not lately. It's like she's preoccupied with something else, like she has other things on her mind. I pulled over to the side of the road and dialed John's number again. He answered promptly. "Hello, John." I said. "Yeah, Uncle Frank. It's me." "I'm sorry, John. I didn't get a good look at her face, but she was wearing that dark brown raincoat, and you know how she styles her blonde hair in that long French braid. And it was definitely her hat. I didn't see her Lexus. He was the one driving. I guess she met him somewhere." I could hear John holding back tears, so I reassured him. "Hang in there, John. I'm on my way." Something else was weighing on my mind. It was November 15th. My birthday had been on the 12th. I had turned 40. Diana never mentioned a word. Ever since the kids came along, we always made birthdays special. Not in terms of lavish gifts, but with simple things like cake, ice cream, candles, and singing happy birthday. I deliberately sing off-key just to annoy Diana. I always tell her not to make a fuss, but secretly I enjoy it. It stung a little when Tuesday passed without anyone acknowledging my birthday. Well, now I guess I understand why. I accelerated, determined to find out the truth. Damn it, I was going to catch her. Should I call home? I pulled over and dialed the house number. "Hello," my mom answered. "Hey, Mom, it's me." "Oh, Diana." She had to step out. "I'm watching the kids until she gets back." "Do you know when she'll be back?" "No, Frank. She didn't say exactly. Just that she'd be gone for a while, not to call her, and that she'd be back before you got home." "Okay, thanks, Mom." Well, that settles it. Diana's out with the big shit, unknowingly helping him win his bet while my mom is home with my kids. I felt like crying. I didn't, of course. I just felt the urge. Diana and I had discussed fidelity before we got married. I had fooled around a bit before meeting her, but not much. Diana, on the other hand, was every guy's fantasy. I couldn't imagine her having less experience than me. Throughout our dating and year-long engagement, she insisted she was a virgin. I didn't believe her, but I never pushed it. We had the big wedding. We're both Methodists, so choosing a church was easy. We picked hers. My parents didn't mind. They fell in love with her the first time they met her, as did all my siblings. Our wedding drew nearly 300 people. It was a sweltering June day, one of the hottest of the year. For our honeymoon, we went to Niagara Falls. Where else would we go? Throughout our dating years, I felt like I was always under scrutiny. With 4 siblings, numerous nieces, nephews, and cousins, all enamored with Diana, I couldn't even have a private moment without someone informing her about every little detail. As for me keeping an eye on Diana, it never crossed my mind. I figured if she truly loved me, she'd remain faithful. And if she didn't, I didn't want to know. As for her claim of being a virgin, I always thought it was nonsense. I held on to that belief until our wedding night when I discovered she truly was a virgin. I took Diana's virginity. She had never been with another man. Why now? Why, after 17 years of public battles and private adoration, would she betray us and for someone like Scott Jenkins? I had to push these thoughts out of my mind. Dwelling on them would only lead to tears, or so I told myself. Men don't cry, at least not in my family. I recall our wedding night vividly. I remember how petite she looked, how frightened she seemed. It struck me, given the 2 years we'd spent together, hearing her boastfulness, all the stories of her popularity, the countless boys she turned down, and the many hearts she claimed to have broken. I knew I was fortunate. She didn't have to remind me. I remembered when her ex, her last serious boyfriend, resurfaced. It was like something out of a song, like Roy Orbison's Running Scared. I knew she had cared deeply for him, enough to almost give him her most prized possession. For months I had been uneasy, fearing his return. But when he did show up, just like in the song, she chose me. I felt invincible that day, walking on air. Yet later, she shattered my confidence by saying she was only with me out of pity. I brushed it off, thinking, so what? I still bid to keep the prize. I refused to entertain the idea of Jenkins. Our bond was too strong, or so I believed. I glanced at the dashboard clock. Just 10 minutes more. 10 minutes, and I'd reach the motel. What was my plan? I had no clue. Ahead, I spotted a light. They had left it on for me. But was it the right motel chain? Parking beside my trusty truck, John stepped out. Jenkins left already. They weren't in there long together. Mrs. McBlain, my aunt, she's still inside, John informed me as he approached. Thanks, John, I muttered, heading for the door. My entire life was on the verge of collapse. I recalled the fear I felt when our kids were born. It was Diana who kept me calm. I reminisced about our adventures, trips to Hershey, New York for plays with our kids, Branson, Nashville, our kids' elementary school graduations. I remembered the time Diana broke her foot, and I pushed her around Walmart in a wheelchair. We had a dog, a big black lab. Diana was carrying a paper plate full of junk food down the stairs to the cellar when the dog jumped up, causing her to fall and break her foot. I had to carry her out to the car. She cried like a baby. I pondered about the Lume's classes, our baby's first words, their first steps, and the dreadful day when her dad passed away from a heart attack due to high cholesterol, as the doctors had warned. Perhaps that's why she insisted on putting me on a diet. Would I lose it all? I almost turned back. I didn't want to face her. I didn't know what I would say. We both understood the importance of fidelity. If I went to that door, there would be no forgiveness, and it would all end badly. Nevertheless, I made it to the door of the motel room, marked 123, and knocked. Silence. I knocked again. A voice from inside snapped. I told you to go away. I wasn't doing that. The voice wasn't familiar. I knocked harder. It's not who you think it is, I insisted. The door opened a crack, secured with a chain. It wasn't Diana. I wanted to shout, to rage, to cry. Who are you? Are you the police? The woman inside demanded. I quickly thought on my feet, reached into my pocket, and pulled out the wad of bills I'd received from the two men who'd attempted to swindle my boys earlier. I handed a 50 through the door. Here, I said, please let me in just for a minute. There was a moment of silence before the door creaked open slowly. The woman stood back, shrouded in darkness, holding what seemed to be a pistol. Her voice was a menacing whisper as she asked, "You're not the police?" I replied, "No, ma'am." She gestured toward the floor with the object in her hand, and I obediently knelt down. "Then who are you?" she demanded. I kept my hands raised, mimicking the gestures from old cowboy movies. It dawned on me what was going on. "I believe I'm the husband of the woman you were impersonating tonight," I said. She kept the object pointed at me, and now I could see it wasn't actually a pistol, though I couldn't identify what it was. "What do you know about that?" she pressed. I explained. "The man you were with earlier made some bets that he could sleep with my wife before Thanksgiving." The words caught in my throat. I noticed a blonde wig on the bureau beside the bed. "But it seems he must have paid you instead." She grimaced. "Yeah, a real creep." "Can I get up?" I asked. She set down the chicken wing she was holding, and I noticed the KFC box. "Yeah, you can get up, but don't try anything. I know karate." I doubted her martial arts skills, but I wasn't concerned. Glancing at the clock on the bureau, I saw it was still pretty early. "How much did he pay you?" I inquired. I could see the wheels turning in her head. $500, she replied. My guess was he probably paid her a lot less. "How would you like to make another $500? I offered. "What do I have to do?" she asked. "It's still early. I bet Jenkins, that's the guy who paid you, is at the country club right now collecting on the bet he thinks he won. I'll pay you another $500 if you come with me now and expose him." She held out her hand. Money. I peeled off the necessary number of Franklins. I was glad I didn't let those two bastards who tried to cheat me pay with a check. I'd made them go with me to their bank and draw out the $1,600 in cash. Now, paying her would wipe out a lot of hard work, but I figured it would be more than worth it. While the escort slipped on her coat, I dialed home once more. My mom picked up. "Hello, is Diana back yet?" "No, she's still out. When will you be home?" "I need to get back to your father," she replied. "I'll be a little while," I responded, sensing her annoyance. But what I had in mind was too important. Once the escort and I were in my old SUV, we headed for the country club. John had already left, but Jenkins was still there. As we arrived, I got the escort to dress up like my wife again, and we confidently entered the country club. It was just after dinner, so the place was bustling. They even had a small band playing, ensuring a lively atmosphere for the night. We strolled past the front desk and headed straight to the restaurant and bar area. Scott Jenkins was at the bar with a group of men. Taking my new companion by the arm, I guided her over to the bar. I greeted Ethan Bailey, who was standing next to Jenkins. "Hey, Ethan," I said. "You've met my wife before." Ethan was taken aback. Jenkins turned around, catching sight of the woman, and went pale. "Hey, Scott, hey, guys," I continued. "You've all met my wife. You remember her. She's been with Scott here all afternoon." With a swift movement, the woman removed her wig. Ethan, quick on the uptake, glanced at Scott. "I think you owe me some money, Scott." Jenkins reached into his pocket, producing a roll of bills. He peeled off a few and handed them to Ethan. But Ethan wasn't finished. "Now, how about my winnings?" Scott nodded, realizing his oversight, and peeled off several more bills. By then, several other guys had gathered behind Ethan, and Jenkins was reaching for his checkbook. I couldn't help but wonder how many of these men had placed bets on whether my wife would sleep with this guy. Mentally, I noted down every person in line, recognizing one of them as an officer of the club. About that time, the club president noticed the line forming and the exchange of money. Betting and settling bets were fine, but it was against the club's etiquette to collect or at the bar. It was deemed uncouth. The president approached briskly. "What's happening here?" I turned to face him. "These gentlemen all made wagers with Mr. Jenkins here that he could seduce my wife before Thanksgiving. It appears Scott here failed, so he paid this lady to impersonate my wife. He must have taken pictures as proof." The president nodded thoughtfully. "Is that so?" Jenkins attempted to brush it off. "It was just a joke. Nothing serious." I interjected. It wouldn't have been a joke if I hadn't intervened. My wife would have been embarrassed. Then I addressed the president. "I apologize, Mr. Lewis. I'll withdraw my family's membership in the morning." The president firmly grasped my elbow, his tone resolute. "No, you won't." He directed his gaze at Jenkins. "I want you out of here right now." Then turned to the other club officer involved in the bet. "You too, get out." As I swept over the rest of the men, all 6 of them, "I want to see all of you first thing in the morning. None of you should bother to tee off, and don't think I won't remember who you are. I believe all of you will be seeking a new club and a new course very soon, and if any other clubs in the area inquire why you're no longer with us, I'll make sure they know." I glanced at the men, some of whom I considered friends, good guys. I knew some of their wives were close friends with Diana. It was a shame, a real shame. The president maintained his grip on my elbow. "Mr. McBlain, Frank, please reconsider. We need members like you here." I pondered if he genuinely meant it, or if he was remembering the times I cleared the parking lot during winter without charge. It dawned on me then that we wouldn't leave, not immediately at least. If we did, it might insinuate that my wife was somehow involved, and I wasn't going to let anything or anyone hurt Diana. "This hurts, Mr. Lewis. Diana is my wife. I'll let you know." I acknowledged the men with a nod, then escorted the prostitute out of the club. Once outside, I walked her back to the motel. After expressing my gratitude, I inquired if she had transportation arranged. She assured me she did, so I bid her farewell and headed home. During the drive, I couldn't shake off thoughts of Diana's whereabouts. It wasn't terribly late. Perhaps she was out doing some early Christmas shopping or preparing for Thanksgiving dinner. But beyond that, exhaustion weighed heavily on me. It wasn't just the long drive or the troubles with the potential cheats in Martinsburg. It was the whole ordeal of the country club with Jenkins and my so-called friends who had wagered on my wife's fidelity. As I turned onto my street, all I craved was my TV, my comfy chair, and a bowl of Rocky Fudge ice cream. But damn, I knew Diana wouldn't let me have that ice cream. Approaching my house, I noticed cars strewn all over. Damn, someone must be throwing a party. Our street was usually quiet, filled with ranch-style homes, but it seemed someone was having a grand celebration, even parking on my lawn. It hit me like a ton of bricks. The party was at my house. Did I miss something? If Diana had planned something and I forgot, I was in for a world of trouble. Since my driveway was blocked, I parked on the street and made my way up the walk. God bless America. I knew it. I was in deep trouble. I eased the door open with as little noise as possible, hoping to slip in unnoticed. But as the door swung open, I was met with a dazzling array of lights and a large sign someone had put up. The room was packed with people, and suddenly, a chorus of voices erupted, shouting, "Surprise! Happy birthday!" Amidst the cacophony, Diana hurried over to me. She was dressed in a pale blue button-up blouse and a dark blue miniskirt, both accentuating her figure in a way that made it clear why anyone would be attracted to her. "Where were you?" she asked anxiously. "We've been worried." My kids were having fun. My nephew John, grinning like a lying turd, threw a trash ball at me. Diana took my hand and pressed her breasts against me. I murmured softly. I had to make a quick stop at the club. She leaned down, towering over me, and planted a sloppy, affectionate kiss on my cheek, the kind I secretly adored. "This wasn't about any bets at the country club, was it?" she whispered. My cheeks flushed. She knew. She had known all along. As she spun around, her long blonde French braid swiped across my face. "Can't wait until everyone leaves," I thought to myself. She wrapped her arms around me and gently pulled me towards the living room. "Come on in. We've got your cake, ice cream, presents, your favorite potato chips with dip and more," she announced to the gathered crowd. "Look, everyone. Frank's home. My husband, my big handsome hero." And indeed I was. And there it was, a story of love, a true hallmark moment. My name is Lester Anderson, and it's been a year since my world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. To say it simply blew up isn't entirely accurate. I played a significant role in its destruction. I orchestrated its downfall and then walked away amidst the chaos, with the assistance of about 60 accomplices who shared in the deceit. My wife, sadly, was among those collaborators, and there was a twisted satisfaction in seeing them all brought down alongside her. Before this seismic shift in my life, I was blissfully unaware. A content husband deeply in love with his wife, relishing in the joy of our shared existence. Our 5-year marriage seemed like a dream. A cozy home, cherished friends and neighbors, fulfilling careers, and supportive families. Financially secure, we were building a future together. But that future took an unexpected turn. I wish I could offer some rationale, a thread of logic to unravel the enigma of our relationship, but the truth eludes even me. She was my college sweetheart, kind, funny, affectionate. She never displayed any inclination toward infidelity, never flirted with other men, nor dressed provocatively. I never once questioned her faithfulness. I'm employed in a research and engineering lab, specializing in cutting-edge electronics for prestigious clients like NASA and the military. We affectionately refer to it as Geek Central. The interesting thing about us geeks is that while we thrive in the complexity of our professional lives, we keep things refreshingly simple at home. What you see is what you get. There's no elaborate facade because, frankly, we're not skilled in the art of deception. Some might view our demeanor as somewhat adolescent, and perhaps by conventional standards, it could be seen that way. We find joy in corny jokes, revel in quoting obscure movies and literature, and have a penchant for diving into intricate details. Despite any veneer of sophistication we may possess, we don't rank highly in the realm of social finesse. However, one thing we hold sacred is our commitment to honesty. In our world, honesty is not just a virtue. It's the cornerstone of our reputations and, consequently, our careers. Geeks don't lie. We understand that our credibility is paramount, both personally and professionally. My wife, Sandra, is employed in high finance at a firm called Wilson & Wilson, a major player in financing large-scale construction projects across the mid-Atlantic states. Despite their significant influence in the industry, I've noticed that many of Sandra's colleagues lack the academic pedigree I would expect. While they possess a solid grasp of financial matters, and some excel at spreadsheet programming, I often find myself feeling out of place when conversing with them, reminiscent of my high school days. A particular incident involving our decision to name our two kittens Oscar and Nat highlighted this divide. One of Sandra's coworkers suggested we should opt for names of more renowned figures, exemplifying the disparity in our perspectives. In their world, it seemed status and conformity reigned supreme, leaving me feeling like an outsider. Sandra and her colleagues are adept at navigating the intricate webs of finance, where every detail is meticulously documented, and personal ambition often takes precedence over individual integrity. The discomfort I initially felt among Sandra's coworkers escalated during the office Christmas party held at the nearby Marriott Hotel. Amidst the free-flowing alcohol and mingling crowds, distinguishing between employees and spouses became increasingly challenging. Overhearing a woman casually mention her work husband struck me as a stark reminder of the collective mindset prevalent in Sandra's professional circle, where alliances are formed for personal gain and loyalty is often fleeting. While I may not have harbored animosity toward them initially, events like these gradually eroded any semblance of goodwill I once held. It was an unsettling remark that caught me off guard. My initial instinct was to whirl around and identify the speaker, but a sudden urge to remain inconspicuous seized me. Stop, listen, don't react. Blend into the background, a voice in my head urged. We'll all have the next week off, but I suppose we'll manage without crossing the street, one of the women quipped, prompting laughter from both. You could always conjure up a minor account emergency, another chimed in, eliciting even heartier laughter. What did they mean by crossing the street? Were they insinuating they'd need to return to work during the Christmas party festivities? The cryptic conversation troubled me, stirring a sense of unease. Despite my discomfort, I reassured myself. I made the right choice in marrying Sandra. Whatever they're implying, it can't be good. With that, I pushed the unsettling thoughts aside and rejoined the revelry. For the next 3 weeks, the incident slipped from my mind. However, on a Friday evening, as I ascended the carpeted stairs from our basement, I overheard Sandra's voice from upstairs. All right, I'll take care of it. What's a wife for, after all? She chuckled. Wife? What's that supposed to mean? I wondered aloud, turning the corner just in time to see Sandra hanging up the phone. What was that all about? I inquired, striving to keep my tone free of accusation. She visibly startled as I approached. Oh, that was Martin Harris. It's work-related. I need to head into the office tomorrow, and we'll have some late nights next week. There's an opportunity to assemble a funding package for a new apartment complex. They're planning on G Street, Sandra explained. The memory of the cryptic conversation from the Christmas party resurfaced in my mind. Sounds like a minor account emergency, I remarked. Sandra chuckled. I wouldn't exactly call it an emergency, but it's an opportunity we can't afford to miss. I couldn't help but express my disappointment. We've both been putting in long hours this year. I was hoping we could take it easy this month and spend more time together. Sweetie, please don't be upset. These opportunities don't come around often. You have to seize them while you can, or they slip away. Sandra reassured me. I promise I'll make it up to you. Her mention of wife caught me off guard. What's with the wife talk? I thought you were my only wife. How many husbands do you have? I quipped, trying to inject a bit of humor into the conversation. A flicker of surprise flashed across Sandra's face as she realized I had overheard her, attempting to mask it with a smile. She reassured me, just you, silly. It's something we say at the office. We joke about seeing more of our work partners than our actual partners at home. It's just a little office humor. Everyone says it. Despite her attempt at reassurance, her trembling hands betrayed her underlying unease. I'll just go in for a few hours tomorrow to kickstart things, and then we'll have the rest of the weekend together, she promised, her smile strained. The remainder of Friday night passed quietly, and Sandra left for the office on Saturday morning, as if it were any other workday, albeit dressed casually. However, our promised weekend together didn't commence until after 7 p.m. Saturday night. Now, don't misunderstand me. I appreciate hard work and the importance of meeting deadlines. However, what troubled me was the sense of secrecy permeating our marriage. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more secrecy in our relationship than I had ever suspected. As I waited for Sandra to return home on that Saturday, my thoughts revolved around this newfound realization. Despite regularly sharing stories from my work and recounting anecdotes I'd heard, I suddenly became acutely aware that Sandra never divulged anything about her own job. It dawned on me that she had erected a substantial barrier between her work life and her home life, a divide I had never truly comprehended before. When my wife finally arrived home on Saturday night, she headed straight for the shower, while I got started on grilling some steaks. Despite my attempts to focus on cooking, my mind remained fixated on that unsettling wife remark. Even if it was meant innocently, it rubbed me the wrong way, leaving me feeling irked. Two phrases from the Christmas party continued to replay in my mind like a broken record. One was work husband, and the other was crossing the street. I couldn't shake the nagging question of whether these phrases held literal or figurative meaning. Considering Sandra's office location, I couldn't help but ponder the possibilities. Across the street were two prominent buildings. The first, a sizable medical practice, and the other, the Marriott Hotel. It dawned on me that many individuals at the Christmas party seemed intimately familiar with the layout of the hotel, sparking a flurry of unsettling thoughts. While I tried to rationalize their frequent visits as business-related lunches or client accommodations, my sour mood led my imagination down darker paths. That week, feeling an overwhelming need for a break from the lab, I made a conscious decision to have my lunch in the solitude of my car. As fate would have it, my parking spot happened to be conveniently located just a block away from my wife's workplace, affording me a clear view of the street stretching between her office and the Marriott. What unfolded before me left a bitter taste in my mouth. Around 11:45 on Monday morning, just before the lunch hour, I observed several couples strolling across the street and disappearing into the Marriott. By 12:30, the same couples leisurely made their way back to their respective offices. Not a single group of 3 or 4, just pairs. While I didn't catch sight of my wife among them, my unease only intensified. The following day yielded a similar sight, different couples, but the same suspicious behavior. I entertained the idea of investigating further by observing the hotel lobby, but the risk of being recognized, particularly by Sandra, deterred me. In a move born out of desperation, I took a step I never imagined I would. That very afternoon, I enlisted the services of a private detective named Tristan Howard. I briefed him on what I had witnessed and outlined my desperate need for answers, providing him with a photograph of Sandra. His advice was as perplexing as it was disconcerting. Don't dwell on it. Resume your normal routine and trust that if there's something to be found, it will reveal itself soon enough. Though I voiced my hope that my suspicions were unfounded, I returned to work, grappling with a torrent of emotions. My investment in Tristan's services proved worthwhile. Thursday morning, he sat me down in his office and delivered the grim truth. On Wednesday morning, at precisely 11:45, my worst fears were confirmed. My wife entered the Marriott lobby with Martin Harris's arm draped around her waist. A fleeting stop at the reception desk secured them a key before they ascended to the 4th floor, not re-emerging until close to 12:40. Tristan, with his knack for gathering discreet information, had a private conversation with the desk clerk, shedding light on a disheartening truth. My wife and her alleged work husband were frequent guests at the hotel. This revelation came at a swift cost of $300, a mere down payment according to Tristan, who cautioned me that obtaining incontrovertible evidence would come at a higher price. Despite my internal turmoil and self-loathing for entertaining such suspicions, I resolved to obtain ironclad proof, even if it meant delving into the darkest corners of my thoughts. To achieve this, Tristan proposed a plan involving cooperation from the desk clerk and strategic room rentals. He would ascertain the room my wife and her colleague would occupy during their next visit, renting the adjacent rooms to install discreet video surveillance. It entailed additional expenses, a bribe included, but I was willing to pay whatever it took to uncover the truth. The past 7 days had been excruciatingly painful. I attempted to distance myself from Sandra as much as possible, yet she couldn't help but notice my erratic behavior. Brushing off her inquiries with vague mentions of work, I doubted she bought my flimsy excuses. Despite my efforts to maintain a facade of normalcy, my heartache was palpable. When Sandra expressed a desire for intimacy, I reluctantly obliged, convincing myself that if I hadn't discovered anything concrete yet, perhaps there was nothing to find. But as we made love, my heart was heavy with a mixture of anger and anguish. It felt like my marriage was unraveling before my eyes. Tristan's call from the clerk came as a bleak confirmation of my worst fears. He secured the room for the following Wednesday morning and evening, and I found myself sitting in his office on Thursday morning, clutching the evidence that shattered my world, watching the gut-wrenching 40-minute video of my beloved wife, the very center of my universe, engaged in intimate acts with her supposed work husband, Martin Harris, left me utterly devastated. In moments of turmoil, a geek's mind can wander down strange paths. I recalled an old joke about a husband discovering his wife's infidelity and threatening her lover with a gun, saying, "Don't laugh. You're next." But I vowed to maintain a sense of order amidst the chaos. They would face the consequences of their betrayal, and I would find the strength to walk away. Before confronting the situation head-on, I knew I needed some time away. Being under the same roof as Sandra felt suffocating, unbearable, so I arranged to take the rest of the week off, citing a need to be down at Wallops for the weekend if anyone asked. With that sorted, I hastily packed a bag, left a note behind, and embarked on a journey westward. Thankfully, I had a childhood friend, Lucas, residing about an hour past Baltimore, who graciously offered to host me for the weekend. I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing I wouldn't risk encountering Sandra while at home. In my current state, I couldn't fathom feigning normalcy. It was all I could do to keep my emotions in check, to gather my thoughts, and devise a plan. Ironically, leaving that note was the first instance I ever lied to my wife, and it weighed heavily on my conscience. But in that moment, escape was imperative, and I wasn't ready to reveal my hand just yet. As I drove westward, I found myself grappling with profound questions about the woman I thought I knew so well. Had she mastered the art of compartmentalization to the extent that she could justify having 2 husbands? One thing became abundantly clear. My wife had mistaken trust for naivety. I had never been naive, and deceiving a husband who placed unwavering trust in her was hardly a feat. The days of blind trust were over. My marriage lay in ruins, awaiting its inevitable funeral. Childhood friends possess an uncanny ability to see through facades. They know you inside out, your past, your present, and your innermost thoughts. There's no hiding from them. Within minutes of my arrival at Lucas's place, he read the turmoil etched on my face. Sharing the devastating news, his reaction mirrored my unseething anger. But it was his wife, Tiffany, who urged us to temper our rage and approach the situation with clarity. She didn't defend Sandra. Rather, she implored me to reflect on my desires and avoid acting impulsively. A true understanding of the social dynamics at play often requires a woman's perspective. While my fury was directed at my wife and her alleged work husband, Tiffany's focus expanded to include the broader context of the workplace. In her eyes, it was the women who held the power over sexual dynamics, either actively participating or turning a blind eye. She quipped, "Men are pigs, and it's up to women to civilize them," sharing a knowing smile with her husband, who reluctantly concurred. "I want to bring them all down. I'm divorcing my wife. That deceitful, unfaithful woman. She's betrayed me. And it's clear this isn't her first offense. I want to inflict pain on every single one of them. I want to make Mr. Martin Harris regret ever being born with a shred of decency, and I want every adulterer in that office to rue the day they chose to betray their vows." Tiffany attempted to inject some rationality into my seething anger. "Be absolutely certain you're prepared for the consequences. There might be factors at play that you're unaware of. Perhaps she'll be consumed by remorse and never repeat her actions. You love this woman enough to marry her. Do you truly want to throw it all away now? Think it through. Reluctantly, I produced the damning evidence, and together we watched the footage. Martin Harris, a mere pencil pusher, his domain was the realm of finances. While I dedicated myself to evening runs, he indulged in extravagant dining experiences. Martin Harris was anything but formidable. For 40 agonizing minutes, we bore witness to my wife surrendering herself to her supposed work husband. It was a soul-crushing experience. She wore a smile, even shared laughter, while I felt as though my world was crumbling around me. As the video concluded, a heavy silence settled over the room. I turned to Tiffany, seeking guidance. How long should I ponder this? I asked, desperate for clarity. She simply shook her head, enveloped me in a comforting embrace, and silently began preparing dinner. Lucas had pursued a career in law, an irony not lost on me. Yet he remained a loyal friend. And for that, I forgave him. His wife, a high school science teacher, possessed a surprisingly analytical mind. Over the course of the weekend, we engaged in countless discussions, and with their invaluable assistance, I began formulating a plan. Calling Tristan, I outlined my intentions. It would come at a cost, but with patience, it was feasible. We devised a strategy to divide my wife's office into 2 groups, management and those closely affiliated with Sandra, approximately 10 individuals, along with their respective work spouses. My goal wasn't merely to scorch them. I wanted to obliterate them. The remaining employees would feel the repercussions, albeit without draining my savings. Tristan would discreetly install cameras in the offices of management and the targeted coworkers, while the others would be captured on film entering and exiting through the lobby. When the time came to file for divorce, I would take legal action against the company, exposing the indiscretions of every employee's spouse. Throughout that weekend, I agonized over whether I had missed the warning signs. There must have been signs, I reasoned. She never appeared cold or indifferent. She was always supportive when I shared details about my work. Could she truly lead a double life without remorse? Was she perhaps a sociopath? Her jittery reaction when I confronted her about the wife remark on that fateful Friday suggested she was well aware of right and wrong, or at the very least cognizant of potential consequences. I struggled to comprehend how anyone could sustain such duplicity without succumbing to a nervous breakdown. Somewhere amidst my contemplation, a troubling thought surfaced. By leaving town, I had unwittingly provided Sandra and her alleged paramour the ideal opportunity to use our home for their illicit rendezvous. Anger surged within me before I swiftly realized the futility of dwelling on it. In the grand scheme of things, their actions were inconsequential. I had already made up my mind to divorce her, irrespective of her current behavior. I resolved to leave her the bed, out of sheer practicality, and claim what was rightfully mine from the rest of the house. Steadier than ever, I braced myself for the forthcoming deception as I embarked on the drive home Sunday night. To save on expenses, we opted not to capture footage of the work spouses in their hotel rooms more than once, except for my wife and Mr. Harris. This minimized the number of room rentals and reduced the time required for Tristan's team. When it came to Sandra, I wanted to eliminate any possibility of her dismissing her actions as a one-time occurrence. In just 2 weeks, we achieved our objectives. Those weeks were excruciating. I loathed every moment of being near Sandra, knowing what she had done. I sought to expose the complicity of the entire office, the individuals who knew of my wife's infidelity yet remained silent. Uncovering their deceit required additional time. Most work spouses rendezvous once a week, with some being more frequent visitors to the hotel across the street and others less so. While we didn't catch them all, we captured enough to serve our purpose. Sandra and her accomplice adhered to a strict every Wednesday schedule. To distance myself from the pain, I pretended to work late on numerous evenings. However, the ache of being home was unbearable. I concocted fictitious emergencies, supposedly requiring me to travel to Wallops on Thursdays, yet in reality, I spent those nights in a hotel near my workplace. On Friday nights, I sought solace in visiting Lucas and Tiffany once more, and on Monday nights, I returned to the hotel, seeking refuge from the torment of home. Sandra began to voice complaints about feeling neglected, and our relationship gradually turned icy. Little did she know the depth of that chill. Despite her efforts to maintain a facade of normalcy at home, I was emotionally distant, and it reflected in her demeanor. Seeking refuge, I relocated to the guest room for sleeping, and made a point to leave the house early each morning. After all, I had my own set of deadlines at work. Perhaps Sandra sensed the strain in our marriage, or perhaps she bought into my flimsy excuses, or maybe she simply didn't care. Regardless, it didn't deter her from continuing her Wednesday lunches with her work husband. If anything, their lunch breaks only seemed to lengthen. It became evident that infidelity ran rampant in her workplace, with a significant portion of the staff, including many in senior positions, engaging in extramarital affairs. It was a case of the rot starting from the top. As the saying goes, months later, upon reflection, I realized a glaring absence in the 3 videos I had viewed. Not once did they mention me. Neither he nor she spoke ill of me or felt the need to defend my honor. What stung even more was the sight of her wearing her wedding rings throughout those encounters, a silent testament to her indifference toward our marriage. It was as though I were invisible, non-existent in that aspect of her life. While there was a semblance of tenderness between the two lovers, it felt hollow, lacking the genuine intimacy one would expect from a committed relationship. They were more than mere casual partners, yet fell short of being true lovers. The moment I witnessed my wife and her work husband saunter through the lobby, his arm possessively around her waist, heading toward the rendezvous, I knew the marriage was beyond salvaging. Watching them engage in their tryst confirmed there would be no room for discussions, excuses, or worn-out cliches. I was resolved to obliterate not just our marriage, but also her entire workplace. I had no interest in hearing her apologies or witnessing her tears, and the mere notion of it being solely about sex was abhorrent. 4 encounters would shatter any delusions of her fidelity. My lawyer meticulously drafted the legal documents, while Tristan handled the rest. At precisely 10 o'clock on Monday morning, a process server strode into the offices of Wilson & Wilson, serving both Sandra and Martin Harris at their desks. With a deliberate stride, he proceeded to the CEO's office, where he served the company itself. It's almost ironic in hindsight. The CEO, Simon Wilson, was complicit in the very infidelity I sought to expose. At 67, he had a trophy wife scarcely half his age. What drove him to seek solace in the arms of a 45-year-old secretary remains a perplexing enigma to me. My phone incessantly buzzed at 10:20, but I silenced it without a second thought. Meanwhile, 5 of Tristan's operatives commenced distributing manila envelopes to the genuine spouses of every employee of the company. Some received photographs, others videos, accompanied by detailed reports they could utilize in divorce proceedings. Martin Harris' wife was given a particularly substantial envelope. For others, a letter served as a wake-up call, enlightening them about the unsavory activities unfolding at Wilson & Wilson, should they wish to confront their spouses upon returning home. Each envelope bore a brief note. In the spirit of transparency, you can thank Sandra Anderson for bringing this to our attention. I couldn't help but wonder how many allies my deceitful wife would have come Tuesday morning. Wilson & Wilson's demise was swift and profound. Following my lawsuit against the company, a deluge of 20 additional legal actions ensued. Divorces proliferated throughout the office like a raging inferno, consuming even marriages where evidence of infidelity was absent. Management's attempts to terminate employees tainted by the scandal only unveiled their own complicity in the debacle. Innocent individuals departed rapidly, seeking to salvage their tarnished reputations. The media seized upon the spectacle, and within 2 weeks, an article chronicling the firm's downfall prominently featured the term work spouses. I couldn't help but speculate about the source of that phrase. Perhaps it was coined by some clueless husband, ignorant of the realities of corporate culture. Business dwindled in the wake of the scandal, culminating in the closure of the office within 2 months. For nearly a year, the once bustling building stood eerily vacant. Eventually, I found myself seated across from Sandra in my lawyer's office. Tears streamed down her face as she attempted to convey remorse. After weeks of receiving a barrage of angry messages, punctuated by denials, pleas, and futile attempts at bribery and negotiation, she finally assumed a modicum of accountability for her actions. She attributed her transgressions to the allure and atmosphere of high finance. I struggled to comprehend the correlation between her infidelity and the financial sector, but evidently it was ingrained in the culture. However, her apology was short-lived. In a baffling turn of events, she attempted to shift blame onto me, asserting that my failure to communicate my concerns contributed to the situation. Ridiculous. You shouldn't need to remind your spouse to abstain from engaging in extramarital affairs, let alone cultivating a so-called work husband in the first place. Sandra's infidelity remained a perplexing enigma to me, as she never provided a satisfactory explanation. All I could discern was that she had undergone a profound transformation. The once bright-eyed and seemingly honest woman with a passion for business had morphed into a deceitful and duplicitous individual, seemingly guided by the mantra, "What he doesn't know won't hurt me." Tristan informed me that their liaisons only occurred on Wednesdays during their lunch breaks, and they hadn't seized the opportunity to meet during my absence from home that weekend. It was as if Sandra adhered to some twisted form of dual marriage, where cheating was constrained but not entirely eradicated. Tristan attempted to rationalize her behavior, suggesting it might be a perverse form of bonding ritual. Wilson & Wilson fostered a toxic corporate culture where team building was synonymous with intimate connections among coworkers. There seemed to be a distorted sense of loyalty at play, where employees confined their extramarital activities to a single individual, often their closest colleague. Tristan speculated that they perceived themselves as intellectually superior, sharing a clandestine knowledge or engaging in collective risk-taking. Whether it was a shared secret or a warped social contract, I struggled to comprehend. Despite my efforts to make sense of the situation, I couldn't shake my emotional investment in both my marriage to Sandra and the circumstances surrounding our divorce. I faced a choice: to spend a lifetime grappling with the complexities of these individuals, or to simply walk away. Ultimately, I opted for the latter. My quest for revenge didn't unfold as I envisioned. While I emerged victorious in my legal battles, the company coffers were barren, and Martin Harris faced near-total devastation in his divorce proceedings. The irony wasn't lost on me. My own actions had precipitated the financial downfall of both the company and Harris, rendering them incapable of satisfying the legal judgments against them. My wife, stripped of her job, sought alimony upon our divorce, but my lawyers successfully argued that her unemployment was a direct consequence of her infidelity, and she was denied any financial support. Even the betrayed spouses, though wounded by their partner's betrayal, harbored resentment toward me for exposing the unpleasant truth, placing me squarely in their line of blame. It was an unforeseen consequence in a vast city, where I could exist without their affection. However, one individual's reaction caught me off guard. Emma Harris approached me one evening at a bar, radiating an undeniable allure that captivated my attention. She introduced herself and took a seat beside me, her intentions palpable. "I'm divorcing my husband, but I want more than just revenge," she declared. "I want to confess to him that I slept with his mistress's husband. Will you assist me in this endeavor, Mr. Anderson? What do you say, Lester? Will you defile me and aid in humiliating the man who betrayed your wife?" After some contemplation, I acquiesced. As it turned out, it was a decision I didn't regret. Sandra's family initially directed their anger toward me, but I decided to confront the issue head-on by showing them the incriminating video. Witnessing her betrayal firsthand, they were overcome with emotion, offering apologies and shedding tears. Ultimately, they absolved me of blame for the divorce, although they attempted to persuade me to grant Sandra a second chance. However, forgiveness eluded me. I couldn't recall Sandra ever asking for it, and my heart remained hardened for over a year. Reflecting on the events during my divorce, I couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. Despite my expertise in high-tech electronics, it was rudimentary methods, a parked car, a bribe to the desk clerk, and off-the-shelf miniature cameras that exposed Sandra's infidelity. It was a stark reminder that even the most advanced technology couldn't prevent betrayal in matters of the heart. Reflecting on how effortlessly I stumbled upon their deceit, I couldn't shake the thought of how easily they could have concealed their affair. It dawned on me after overhearing a couple of conversations. From that point on, their indiscretions were glaringly obvious. Couples nonchalantly crossing the street displayed a brazenness that bordered on arrogance. It begged the question, did anyone care about appearances anymore? It seemed almost inconceivable that they had managed to evade detection for so long. It made me question whether the world I inhabited bore any resemblance to the reality around me. Were such affairs commonplace? In the realm where I worked, those who boasted of their romantic conquests were usually solitary figures, their only companion being their own hand. Once again, I found myself relegated to the sidelines, observing the antics of the cool kids from afar. Occasionally, I catch glimpses of Sandra in passing, whether on the streets or in stores. We never exchange words, and I remain oblivious to her current endeavors. When our eyes meet, I see a flicker of sorrow in hers, but I can't bear to hold her gaze for long. The mere sight of her still tugs at my heartstrings, a reminder of the life I once knew that now lies in ruins. I've turned a corner, embarking on a journey of starting anew. Like a detonator igniting an explosion, I set events in motion that tore apart not only our relationship, but also my own sense of self. I'm still piecing together what remains of me, still wrestling with the question of who I want to become. Perhaps in time, I'll find the answer.